is 4 minus 1 is 3. Quick math. Why did she say that?
They're talking between each other.
Okay.
Live? For real?
Live? We're on. There's no one watching, though. Well, I don't know how there's no one watching.
No, Lilypad's there and Sean's there. That's all we need.
But it says 0 viewers.
Well, it didn't catch up yet. Now it's catching up. Hello, everyone. Welcome to... You were just going to talk shit the whole... What? Welcome to number 49 of From the Ground Up. First, I want to give you guys a little background of like why we do our shirts and why we do our merch. If you don't know or you haven't listened to the podcast, Theportcitypythons.com. We have shirts available. That's what we do to basically fund our podcast. And I don't want to put ads on the podcast, and I don't want to ask you guys for like money or anything like that. But it would be awesome if you support the podcast by buying a shirt or using our Amazon affiliate link, which is like, you don't have to pay any extra. You just go to our link, which is going to be in the description below. And then you buy things like you normally would on Amazon. I think we get like 5%. So thank you to the person who bought season 1 of House Hunters, because we got 50 cents. Shout out to that person. House Hunters, what's up?
So as long as you click through our link, then go to Amazon and buy whatever you want, Amazon gives us money.
For no reason.
For no reason. We didn't do anything.
But it's not like we are like making Amazon's business, you know?
I don't know.
We're not converting people on Amazon.
But they saw, I guess we're technically bringing people to Amazon because we make the link available.
But were they going to buy House Hunters before we gave them the link? Or
I don't know. I don't know if someone was watching a snake video and was like, "Oh, I want to watch House Hunters now."
You need a house with a good basement for snakes. So they were doing research.
Oh, okay.
All right. And on that note, we're going to actually start. So today we have Donovan Winterberg. So Donovan, we are drinking a Notorious OAT from Four Corners, a local Dallas brewery right here.
Free shirt to anyone who knows the reference.
They should know the reference, but it opens up.
We'll see. Does anyone know the reference?
But Donovan, what are you drinking over there?
Of course, it'd be Guinness.
There you go.
We are stout fans over here.
Irish boy myself. That's a good choice. But it is the what is it, like the extra stout, or it's not the original Guinness?
Yeah, it's the extra stout.
Yeah, that's good.
It's hard to find the stouts out here.
Well, not if you're talking Guinness, but yeah, we drink pretty much exclusively stouts and zero hoppiness and IPAs. And so Donovan, give us a little background on where you grew up.
Great transition there, babe. That was
while
amazing.
I'm opening a beer. While I'm opening a beer, give us a little background on where you grew up and what got you into snakes.
Well, I'm originally from Southern Illinois, and where I live now is pretty much where I grew up, and it's within 30 minutes of Snake Road. So I'm sure a lot of your listeners, viewers are familiar with that. I've
no idea. I don't know what that is.
Well, Snake Road is the only road in the U.S. that they closed because of the reptiles migrating across it.
What?
There's like a bluffs on one side of the road, and it's not like it's a major highway or anything. It's like within a park, and then there's swamps on the other side. So it's got this nice mix of habitats. So every spring, the animals come out of the bluffs and go down to the swamp, and then in the fall they go back in there. But yeah, I'm from that area. I've got a lot of family and friends that have private land all around there too, which is really nice because I have access to places most people don't go to. And like I said, there's not really much to do in Southern Illinois. I've always liked animals since before I started kindergarten. And I kind of later got into, more specifically amphibians and reptiles. Once I was like 12 or 13, started keeping snakes then. I would go out and catch, pretty much everything, I could find, and keep it. And then that was like the 80s. Then, I had a few things I got from pet stores, some of which I had no business keeping. I had no clue what I was doing. But I got my first corn snake on my 16th birthday, which I should know the math right now. I'm 42 now, so just subtract that. But and I had him for over 20 something years actually.
Wow.
And I always just preferred North American colubrids, especially corns. I know they kind of got they're the easy beginner snake, but I didn't have problems with that. I liked all the genetic things I could do with them, and they were so easy to keep. And I just didn't really feel like I needed to overcomplicate things. I've kept a lot of other rat snakes, milk snakes, king snakes, stuff like that, garters. I had a pair of ball pythons for maybe 6 months, and this was like long before they became kind of the big thing. And I don't know, they just didn't do anything for me.
That's him.
Yeah, nothing against them. I think it's cool, all the stuff people's done with them. But yeah, I've always been just a big colubrid guy, and it's what I enjoy doing. And I'm just fortunate enough where I have cheap taste in snakes, I guess. So
yeah, I think people forget that back in like when I first started, it was like the 90s. I wasn't starting anything. Like I was with my dad, and my dad kept.
What do you wait? You can't say when you first started you're in the 90s. You were born in the
child.
90s. You didn't start anything.
But what I'm saying is that in the 90s, like corn snakes were the only thing where you would find cool mutations and all these different mutations. And then like ball pythons were like the sickly things that don't eat, that didn't have any use in the hobby. So it's like, I guess, explain a little on how the hobby's changed from like the beginning when you started to now.
Yeah, I mean, when I started doing it, like I said, I got my first animals. I think I paid, it was well over $100 for just an albino corn snake from the pet store.
Whoa.
This, like I said, this was before really the internet was a thing. And it's weird because, I think part of the reason, some snakes like the ball pythons and stuff like that, they don't have as many, they don't lay as many eggs, so they're not as easy to reproduce. Corn snakes, it's not uncommon to get, 20 or 30 eggs, if they double clutch within a season from one female. And, it's just, I think it was just kind of the thing to do. I've always had the belief that with all the different, mutations and stuff like that, like within ball pythons, I mean, theoretically, why couldn't you do that with anything else? And I still think to this day, there's a lot more things floating around in the captive corn snake gene pool than people have actually taken the time to figure out, just because there really wasn't that incentive to, I mean, just look at the big variation in normals. And the interesting thing I will say, comparing corn snakes to ball pythons is, and if I'm wrong, someone correct me, but in corn snakes, most of the genes, except for, a few, are recessive traits. And that seems to be more the opposite, where you get like incomplete dominant and, other traits like that within the ball pythons. And like I said, it blows my mind, just to see all the stuff people are producing with that. But, I'm, like I said, I'm not glad that, that some people, I mean, I think it's cool that people can make good money breeding with snakes. And I know that's a whole nother discussion right there, which I don't know if I want to get into, but I just think it's cool that people can do what they love and they can make money. You don't have to be sleazy about it or whatever. I mean, yes, there are some people who are, but there's some people who are legit at it. And it's just, I don't know, I just think it's fascinating that, with social media and technology and the internet and everything, that people can find this weird little niche, and, support themselves, or, have a little second income, or at the very least, a hobby that pays for itself.
Right.
I just think that's cool. And and I don't care if it's snakes or art or whatever somebody does. I'm just like, you've got your thing that you're good at and that you know about. And, it's, you can make that into, something with just, just minimal effort.
Yeah, that why there's more recessive in colubrids, like that was a question I had for we had a geneticist, we had Dr. Travis Wyman, and he explained that colubrids are actually further in evolution, therefore they have less of a rate of mutation and they're all recessive for some reason. He would be much better at explaining. I'm stupid, but for some reason it has to do with that colubrid species are more involved than your boas and pythons. So
right.
Which I thought was cool.
About that, but that's a cool idea. Yeah.
Yeah, but so basically corn snakes for the most part, or a lot of your colubrids as you see are like 85% recessive when it's 85 incomplete dominant maybe on pythons.
Right.
And those are just made up numbers, but so where does art come into this whole thing and where do they intersect?
Well, yeah, I had been doing art just as long as, I've been interested in animals, like I said, since I was at least in kindergarten, if not before. And I've got report cards from, grade school where the teacher's putting the notes that I'm always drawing animals. And after college, I was like, everybody's like, go to college, after high school, everybody's like, go to college and everything. And I was like, okay, I went for art and I didn't really do anything with it after that. And I just kind of put it on hold because, like I said, I got more involved in the reptile thing. And when I get interested in stuff, I get obsessed with it. And it almost to the point where it crowds out everything else because I want to know everything I can about it. And that's just how I am. And so the art was just kind of like put off on the side. And like I said, I wasn't really doing a whole lot with it. And when I started seeing my my son's mother, she did a lot of art too, and she kind of got me back into doing it as well. And she was doing some commissions and stuff. She was a reptile breeder herself, and I seen her doing it. I was like, I'm going to try it and stuff like that. And then I kept doing it more and more, and it was kind of nice encouraging each other to do it. And like I said, I was posting stuff, and then people, weird thing, they started giving me money for it. And so the more that happened, that just encouraged me to do it more. And, my, reptile collection isn't what it used to be 10, 15 years ago by any stretch. But now, like, I just started doing more of the reptiles. And it seems like such an obvious thing now to kind of combine the two. But I've only really kind of been doing the reptile art thing for maybe 2 years. And then I've had a graphic design background as well. I got to go back to school again. And so I went for graphic design, if anything, just because I had all the art classes out of the way. So I started doing logos for a few friends, and that picked up. And now it's like every, I won't say every day, but a couple of times a week, I'll get somebody asking me to do their logo. So now I'm at the problem where I probably took on more commissions than I should have. People were asking me to do it. I'm like, sure, and then it's kind of, now it's almost to the point where it's like, okay, because I still got my own projects I want to work on, but at the same time, I've got to get this other stuff out. And I mean, there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. And like I said, one advantage of the art thing is I don't have to feed it if it doesn't sell.
Yeah.
Packing up for shows, bringing reptile art is a heck of a lot less stressful than, dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of baby snakes to take and worrying about, the temperatures and everything else like that. So I don't know, I kind of feel like with the reptile thing, it's kind of like, I kind of did that, I still love it. And I'll probably get back into it a little more than I had been the past few years, but I kind of feel like now I've kind of found my niche. So, it's not to say maybe 5-10 years from now, I might try something different, but like I said, right now it's my favorite thing to do. People keep giving me money to do it. So,
so why not?
Yeah.
So what was the height of your collection and how did you exactly transition from the giant collection you had? I'm guessing you had more snakes and then to where you are now.
Yeah. I know at one point I had like over 120 breeders, and I think all but maybe half a dozen of those were corns. So I was producing roughly maybe 1,200 baby snakes a year. And a lot of that would go wholesale and stuff like that too, and trade them to my friends, and it's fun, until you've got 500 snakes to feed that night. And it's like I said, it's not something that, oh, I don't feel like doing it. I don't feel good. I want to go do something else. You can't, not to do it. And it just became really stressful. And, I ended up moving to Tennessee for a few years. Tennessee's got some weird laws on colubrids.
Really?
Yeah. Well, you can't keep anything native to Tennessee, which corns are native there.
Oh, fuck.
without a permit. And so anytime you want to bring anything, you got to get your permit from the state before you bring it in, which means you can't really go to a show and pick something up and bring it back because you won't have your permit ahead of time. And then they have and that's about $30 last time I checked. I mean, it's been a couple of years. They might have changed it. So it's about $30 anytime you want to bring anything in. It doesn't matter if it's one snake or 100 snakes. But then to breed them, you need another permit that's about 300. I think it's over 300 now a year to breed them. And yeah, it's just, on the plus side though, if you do, you've kind of got the market cornered there because nobody else wants to mess with it, so a lot of,
it's not even cost effective if you're just a small breeder. I think about us. We had our, 20 babies. We didn't even make $300 off that, did we?
This year, we're going to have 200 babies. I'm not sure.
We'll make over 300.
Right, but your market's just drastically taken away as far as... I mean, can you legally sell in Tennessee, really?
Well, yeah, I mean, with your permit, and you got to keep your paperwork and everything, but where it really gets screwed...
But does the individual have to have the permit?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, how many people...
Yeah, how do you check
find
that?
a pet corn snake?
I'm sure there's all kinds of stuff going down on Craigslist, but I kind of felt I had a relatively large target on my back, not only because I already contacted the DNR there, but, I'm sure that they monitor certain groups and stuff like that. And to their defense, a lot of these guys, they don't really want to mess with it. They don't know a milk snake from a corn snake or anything, let alone all the mutations and stuff like that. They just kind of, fishing and hunting and everything, that kind of stuff, deer and turkey and all that. You can't really expect them to be up on every mutation. But what I was getting at was what Tennessee defines as native. They don't recognize a lot of subspecies. They use the Audubon Field Guide, if you're familiar with that, to determine what lives in Tennessee. So, for instance, you can't have California king snakes. You can't have Honduran milk snakes. You can't have Cape gopher snakes because that field guide doesn't recognize subspecies. And a lot of those subspecies are now, recent, taxonomy has elevated them to full species status. I know the king snakes and milk snakes, is kind of pretty crazy right now. So they use outdated taxonomy to determine what's there. So
everyone's fucked. You're just...
Yeah, I mean, I love Tennessee, don't get me wrong. And I wouldn't mind going back there, but their reptile laws are kind of strange. Now, the advantage of Illinois is the guy that's in charge of the DNR in Illinois, Scott Ballard, is actually a well-known Central American milk snake breeder. And I've known Scott for, probably decades now, and he lives less than an hour away from me. So he's actually got some of the laws changed recently in Illinois that for the most part make it a lot more reasonable, we'll say. I mean, still in Illinois, if I'm going to keep something native like, black rat snakes or whatever, I have to get a permit. But Scott knows, what's what. And he's not looking to just, make a bust like I think a lot of agents are probably in some states, just a little. I mean, I don't want to knock them, but there are some guys that are just a little power hungry. Mm-hmm. And, Scott's a really great guy. And if you got something that's not, he'll give you a warning about it. He's not going to, come in, raid the place and, confiscate everything, which is unfortunate. But, we've all heard stories of.
Yeah, we're in Texas. They're just like
Do people really get off on like taking someone's snakes?
I mean, there's people, there's certain law enforcement agencies that, of course, when you make a big case out of something, you know, that furthers your career. So, I mean, especially guys in Florida who take down big importers. If you read the book Stolen World, or if you read what's the other one, The Lizard King, which is about like them taking down the guys in Florida. Like, he made his career off of taking down Mike Van Nostrand.
Now, that makes sense though. They're putting shit in their pants.
Well, like, they weren't personally. They were just buying the smuggled animals.
But I understand that also. But someone who's just like minding their own business, like not fucking with other countries and stuff. Why? I don't know. I feel like they're not doing anything.
They're just trying to do their job. You know,
broad brushing everybody, but there are some people, unfortunately, like that, and you know, and there are some, like, we'll say, scummy people in the reptile hobby that don't really care. So, you know, it's not limited to one particular, you know, group, but you know, I just think for everybody, it's just best to try to stay on the up and up with everything, and help anybody to, you know, try to go fly under the radar or do something a little, you know.
You will occasionally, like, I'll get a message from someone random, like trying to get me to do something blatantly illegal. And I think those are people just trying to probe me into saying I can get them some endangered species or some shit.
I didn't know that's happened. Wait, I gotta
Have you got any of those kinds of things?
Yeah, I've got some questionable inquiries on Facebook. I've got them at when I did expos selling animals. People, you know, asking to buy really strange things, you know, like red-eared sliders, and you know, you got a table full of colubrids, and they're asking you for red-eared sliders to buy, and it's like, you know, what, I don't know where else that would come from, you know. Person selling turtles at the show. I mean, I don't know, but you know, and so you never know what's going on, and it's just, I don't know.
You got some Colorado river toads, so I can catch you with
this up. You just put that down and beat it up. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I've got some opinions on some wildlife laws. I think they're kind of backwards, but I don't know.
I think when things are proven captive bred, then it's captive bred and it's never going back in the wild.
But they don't have a way to prove it's never. Well, I guess it would die.
We need to document more things, I think, and then they need to recognize our documentation, and then we can work together to make certain things, because it's best for us in Texas to have Texas indigos, so we don't have any idiots out there collecting them. So it's like, if we bred more Texas indigos in Texas and it was legal to, I think that would further the conservation effort instead of hurt it.
No,
but I can see where they say anyone could take them and sell them at an expo then, but we need that proper documentation to bridge the gap.
Right. But, you know, there's always going to be people that are doing stuff, you know, shady and not on the up and up too. So you got to look at, you know, what's, you know, like one of my favorite species is eastern western fox snakes. And I'm trying to think where it was, if it was Wisconsin, somewhere up, you know, in their range around the Great Lakes, where there was like someone found an albino, an A-male. And it's like at a nature center, last I heard. And fox snakes are really, they've got a lot of restrictions in a lot of states where they're in, where they're protected. But, you know, I wonder, like, you know, if they bred that snake, you know, and sold hets or whatever, could they use those funds to help the nature center, to help conservation efforts? You know, you know, I think it, you know, there's some creative ways to help conservation. And I love capitalism. I'll admit it. And I just think sometimes that they really kind of need to bring both parties together and kind of look at something that's going to benefit, because there's always going to be people who are selling stuff that they shouldn't. And as much as it sucks, a lot of the stuff, a lot of the animals that are endangered in the wild isn't really from over collection as much as it's from habitat loss.
Right.
You know, you can make it illegal to keep this and that, but if there's no habitat there, you know, there's not going to be anything left, you know, other than, you know, some captive populations. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to pretend like I've got all the answers. Like I'm this, you know, like I said, I breed pretty corn snakes. and draw pictures. You know, I'm not, you know, probably the best person to ask, but I think there's, like I said, I think some of the laws are kind of backwards. You know, when in the hobby, most people want to reproduce the animal and make more. If the problem is there aren't enough of them, it seems like there should be somewhere in the middle where, you know, whether zoos or nature centers, whoever, certain individuals could be licensed to keep them, you know,
and be that middleman.
Yeah, I mean,
and there's just, I don't know why there'd be laws against corn snakes, as far as, you know, we have, no one wants a wild type corn snake. Well, unless it's these certain locales, but like for the most part.
Right. Well, in Illinois, emery rats, which used to be considered a subspecies of corn snake, they are protected. But the reason is they're threatened in Illinois is because we are like the eastern extent of the range and only have a few counties.
Yeah, you could find 1 million of them here in Texas, or go a little bit farther north, probably where you are in Oklahoma. You can find even more, I'm sure.
Yeah, same thing.
Doesn't make any sense.
Western hognose. That's another one that's protected in Illinois.
Yeah, because it's cold as fuck up there, and they don't like it.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean,
do you think it's good?
Silly sometimes, but
sorry. Do you think that it's good that it's such a state-by-state difference, or do you think it would be better to have a blanket?
No, I think state-by-state.
It has to be state-by-state?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and like I said, one of the problems with this, with the state-by-state thing is not every state has the same taxonomy. So, like I said, in Tennessee, they don't recognize emery rat snakes as a separate species. They're still corn snakes to them. So, theoretically, you know, scaleless corn snakes, which came from an emery cross, I guess, would be considered pure in Tennessee. I don't know.
I mean, let's talk about individuals. I mean, at this point, do you consider things like creamsicles and scaleless? I mean, back in the day, there was nothing wrong with it. Are those crosses? Do you have anything wrong with that?
I've never really been into creamsicles. I mean, I love scaleless just because they're so different. And you know, scaleless is one of those things where people are of one or two extreme opinions. They either hate them or they love them. They're so different looking, and you know, they do a lot of things with the patterns as well. I find them pretty interesting. But you know, there's so much, you know, in corn snakes, and I don't think everything in the wild necessarily abides by our like hard and fast rules of species either. I think, you know, there's probably a lot more mixing of what we currently recognize as different species. You know, I know there's documented cases of fox snakes and bull snakes, which aren't even in the same genus. And gopher snakes and king snakes out in California, I think, it documented, and that's just the ones that they've documented. So I don't know how they may even like look completely like one or the other, but still contain the genetics. Yeah, I mean, we like to set aside these little, you know, boxes of clear cut. This is this, and that's that. But I don't think nature really does that itself.
It's humans trying to name shit for their own sake because we like categorizing things when, in fact, nature doesn't give a fuck. And a Slawinski's corn may be a hybrid of a western rat snake and a corn snake. It may not be, but either way, we recognize it one way. But
yeah, now, I will say Slawinski's is one, and I've, you know, probably stepped on a few toes on social media about it, where I've seen people mixing Slawinski corns, aka Kisatchie rat snakes, which, if anyone's not aware, they're a newly recognized species of rat snake. They used to be thought to be somewhere of like an intergrade between emery, the Great Plains rat snake, and corn snakes. But they, with the mitochondrial DNA analysis, shown that they were a distinct species. So that is one I'm not in favor of people mixing because they are still rare and relatively new species. Where, you know, corns and emery rats, there's so many of them out there, it's not as much of an issue. And I would say the same thing with a lot of Central American milk snakes and stuff like that. There's so few of them, in the U.S. because because you can't really bring them up from these other countries, that I wouldn't advocate somebody mixing that. Now, if someone that does like the jungle corn times Cal King, that kind of stuff, that I kind of put in a different category.
Dark magic, that's what I call it.
Yeah, but I mean, who's to say 20 years from now, I'm sure that we're going to have a completely new understanding of species, and I know subspecies is kind of falling out of favor with a lot of taxonomists. So, a lot of the king snake subspecies have been elevated to species status.
Right.
I think it gets hairy with subspecies.
Especially with we're also into Morelia, so it's like Australian pythons and some of the ones in Indonesia, and that muddies up so hard. It
makes it too, yeah.
There's lots of subspecies, but they look very different to me.
And that's not really the only difference. I mean, we're looking at obvious pattern and color differences, but I'm sure there's all sorts of metabolic differences, behavior, dietary preferences, and stuff like that that's just not as noticeable. And the other thing you got to keep in mind is, by keeping generations of an animal in captivity, we're kind of forcing them into their own different line of evolution. If me and you found, a pair of, we'll say speckled king snakes, and we bred them, and you got half the babies and I got half the babies, who's to say after enough generations your line won't look anything like mine?
Because they're different places.
I mean, I could breed for cream and you can breed for yellow, and we can end up with 100%. I can end up with black and white pure speckles, and you can have screaming yellow and blacks, and people may not even say that looks the same.
Yeah, and we might not even do it intentionally. I mean, the reason that California king snakes look different from Florida king snakes is they got different habitat, and all kinds of things. And basically in captivity, you're putting all these different environmental pressures on them that are eventually no matter how minute changes, you're still bottlenecking the available gene pool, because they don't have as much alleles and everything that they would normally kind of outcross with and everything. So like I said, I've noticed the past few years that the hybrid controversy wasn't like it was. That's a big difference. I think when I kind of got into reptiles, that was one of those things you would post it and it immediately, on the forums, it was all, people making all kinds of threats and allegations and getting banned and losing their cool. And I don't know. I just thought it was kind of silly, because at the end of the day, we're all just keeping snakes, in our house. So, to me, this is supposed to be, it's for fun. And I think a lot of people kind of, I don't know if they just kind of want to make it out to be something like they're curing cancer or something like that. It's like we're keeping.
We're really not that important.
Exactly, in the grand scheme of things, which doesn't say I don't like it any less. Maybe that just shows where my priorities are. I don't know, but
no. But at the end of the day, also, what we call it isn't affecting the snake as much as it's making us angry.
It's just within ourselves,
right? Like we're getting so mad over the names. So okay, the snakes didn't change. Granted, it has different stuff, but
I think at the end of the day, you need to respect what snakes you have and work with what you like, and not care about everyone else, even though I have my own opinion, so I'm a fucking hypocrite.
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of like in our own little bubble, in a sense, from the rest of the world, where they would kind of think it's so petty, that people, and I'm sure people that, we've all had our disagreements with, particularly on Facebook, that, if we were around each other, we'd probably get along great, but it just egos and tempers and everything, when you're trying to always one up them with your next comment. I'm guilty of that just as much as anybody. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm getting old now, but I'm just kind of like, I'm not as concerned what anybody thinks. I do this because it's fun. And I love, talking to people about it and trying to help out however I can. So, my philosophy is there's enough bad crap going on in the world. This is kind of like my escape from it. you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to be bringing all that negativity, into that. And that's another thing that I've tried explaining to people. It's like we've only got so much time and energy in the day to focus on things, and it's like I don't know what it is now where everybody's trying to like find something wrong with somebody, whether it's like politics or the way they're keeping their animals or whatever. I'm like, why don't you focus on like the good and promoting that instead of just trying to like point out, who's wrong and, bad mouth such and such breeder and this and that. It's just, every time you're kind of, focusing on this negativity, you're kind of robbing yourself from doing something a little more, I don't know, I guess productive, something that's going to have a more positive benefit.
And it tends to like the people who put out the negativity and stuff like that. Like we're on YouTube, we're on all this stuff. We get plenty of negativity, but it seems to be people that have only been in the hobby for a short amount of time, or people that don't really, I don't want to say.
But then you have the flip side too. You have the people who've been in it forever and think they know everything.
Well, there's some people with egos that are like for no reason, because like you said, we're all keeping these snakes in fucking tubs and stuff, and who are we to? So it's kind of hard balancing between new people and then like super ego. I don't know.
Yeah, and I've got, people that are always on to me over, they hate the tubs. They're kind of into the bioactive setups. And I don't know. I kind of like, I'm friends with some of them. And sometimes I just kind of like trolling them, and they know, we have our disagreements. And some people get like really worked up and, think I'm horribly abusing my animals by keeping them in tubs. I just want everybody to know that all my animals I've kept in tubs have been undergoing therapy, and they're doing a lot better now. So
yeah, as long as you talk to them, playing music, I mean, they're usually good.
Yeah, I don't know. I always thought it was kind of funny when I have people tell me, and maybe this little bit of my ego, but when you get criticized by people and you've got animals that are older than those people. Yeah.
Like you can't even pay them attention at that point.
Yeah, I don't know. It's sometimes I should ignore it. I've got enough to do as is, but depends on the mood. If I've had my coffee yet,
Yeah, for me, it's like I feel like the babies are like. What's nice is that when you first have baby corn snakes, you realize like how semi arboreal they are. So like I try to offer that in a tub as far as different kind of hides and stuff. And it's like, I feel like people might respect them more if we had them in like crazy bioactive setups, and like they could explore like, cause they're really athletic, cool fucking snakes when it comes down to it. But who's got time for that shit? Sorry.
Well, and the other thing that a friend of mine pointed out was, if we followed some of these recommendations and kept everything in these huge enclosures, that's also going to increase the price of the animals. And I've seen these same people make accusations like aren't big enough, also complain that your prices are too high. But
I want it all.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would be glad to sell an AML for $200 if I mean, I'll be glad to keep it in a 6-foot enclosure with a fucking ficus in it and 20 bromeliads. I don't give a fuck. Not very regionally specific to their natural habitat. I should.
Well, it seems weird to me that a lot of these animals, and I think we kind of run into the danger too of like acting like they're all the same. Obviously a corn snake, is not a hognose snake. It's not a Burmese python. It's not a newt or a turtle, but we kind of lump them all into like they have the same, care, but generally reptiles don't like to stay out in the open, particularly snakes. So it seems weird that people will accuse you of keeping animals in dark drawers or something like that. And they've got this big natural setup so they can look at them. And so I don't know. I mean,
what's the first thing? The first thing your snake does is somehow gets behind the background of the enclosure and hides back there in the smallest space and never moves because it doesn't want to be out in the open.
Right. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna discount everything people say, but at the same time, it's if if tubs were that bad, I don't think we would be where we were or are in the hobby right now. And yet, are they better in like a larger setup with UV lights? Okay, sure. But what's better than that is they're in the wild. So, I mean, if you really want to go down that road, what's best for the snake
is not keeping them at all.
Right. Yeah. So it's just, I don't know. Like I said, it's just kind of funny. Like we were saying, it's like some people seem like their only contribution to the reptile hobby is just bitching about everybody else. And that I find more a problem. And it's just, the whole attract more flies with honey than you do vinegar. If you think, a certain way of keeping animals is better, then do it, promote it. But, how much of that are you doing compared to like telling everybody else how they're mistreating their animals and how much they hate them for keeping them in tubs? Because that right there is just going to turn people off.
Yeah.
But
it's like, who really wants to put all their time into something and then at the end of the day have someone just criticize everything they do? Like we put so much time and effort into our animals. Who wants to sit there and just have people pick apart every single thing that you do when of course you care, like as much as anyone cares, and like we're just as mentally and physically and everything invested into these animals.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, it gets kind of frustrating when people say, oh, you hate animals if you keep them like that. I've seen a couple silly little memes the past week, or like, basically saying if you keep your animals in tubs or racks, you hate them. I'm like, no.
That's true. That's fact. Science.
But, but anyway.
But I mean, I think maybe the ball is going that way more so as a retraction from like certain very popular people who are keeping them terrible. But there's a whole fucking thing. So Valiant Faint asks, what size tubs do you keep? Meaning adults, males, females.
On corns?
Yes.
Yeah, I've used like 28 or 32 quart tubs. Yeah, they would do better in something larger. But I've never, like I said, had any issues with them like that. And the reason I do things the way I do it is when I got serious into breeding, I was looking at other people that were successful at breeding those types of animals. And it's just kind of like in business, you look at who's being successful in that particular field and mimic what they do.
Exactly.
Right.
So when I was trying to determine how to set my stuff up, and that's not to say that stuff can't be improved, but if dozens of people are having great success doing this and it's working, why I don't know if I necessarily want to like reinvent. It's not to say like that it can't be improved, but that's what I've done. If somebody wants to keep theirs in larger enclosures, that's awesome. I've got no problem with that. But yeah, that's how I've always kept. And as far as like ratios to breeding them, I try to at least keep 2 females for every male, sometimes more. That way, if I pair that male to those 2 females and neither of those females produce that year, I can kind of figure out, okay, it's the male. And if I've noticed, I'll keep detailed records. If he did, this is something that's happened a couple of years, and there's, something, it's definitely him. As opposed to if I just had 1-to-1, I don't know who it is. It could be the female. It could be the male. I mean, one year
that's true.
I had I had a male corn for several years. I never got, he never fathered any babies. And then one day I opened his tub up and that male corn had a clutch of eggs in there.
Oh, shit.
And that I think was like, might have been, I don't know if it was the first year I started doing it, but I began like brumating them in groups. Like, okay, I'm going to pair these together, and I'd kind of put them together or put a couple females together and stuff like that, because they're going to be pretty lethargic for those 2 or 3 months. So apparently,
right. What have you
male in there too? And
so clearly someone did something.
Well, for me, it's also like sometimes you get really overwhelmed and you're putting males here, females there, and then you kind of forget. As far as like, if I had two olive pythons or two jungles that may look very similar, I'd be like, or a Mexican black king snake is a good example, actually.
Right.
To where it's like, fuck, which one's the male, which one's the female?
I forget they look all alike.
Luckily with the jungles, I put a male with a female and they started battling immediately. And I was like, those are two guys.
I mean, I've seen people use like metallic paint markers shed off to kind of identify which is which. I mean, usually it's one of the cool things about colubrids. You can tell the males from females by their tail shape with a little practice. But just like with some people, every once in a while you get one where you're kind of like not sure. But yeah, it's the thing about sexing snakes is you got a 50-50 chance. So, you know, I'm sure I've sold stuff before that was missexed, you know, mislabeled or whatever like that. It happens. But, you know, it's, you know, and you got to, you know, there's a lot of considerations when you're breeding animals and selling them that you got to consider from the buyer's perspective and how you're going to make that situation right. And, you know, if you do it for any sort of time, you have all kinds of crazy stuff happen. I had someone one time complain. I gave them free animals. You know, they bought like a bunch of them, and I told them, I said, hey, I'm giving you, you know, some other stuff here too, and they was all cool with it. And I think a couple of them had their labels switched, and they complained about it. And next thing I know, my PayPal account is frozen because they complained to PayPal.
Wow!
Because that was kind of like what I was using, you know, for my business. I have a business account on PayPal. But once I showed them screenshots of our conversation, you know, they kind of, you know. So,
and that's where it sucks if it's like you're trying to go above and beyond to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And then you still get bit in the ass.
Yeah. And this person was a friend of mine too that I had done a lot of trades and sales with before. And so I kind of got to the point where nothing really surprised me anymore. You know, you get people that don't want to pay for stuff that, you know, some lessons you just learn the hard way. And you just got to learn to let it go. You know, it's like, so-and-so ripped me off a couple $100, but is it worth, you know, being pissed off about it, you know, for the next 5 years or whatever? You know, it's just,
I have a
stupid tax.
I have a rap sheet of those people, but it's like, just don't buy from them again. That's really,
but, you know, it gets, you run
but sometimes
where there's some people, you know, not to sell to. That's the bad thing. It's not just who not to buy from, it's who not to sell to. And you never know. I mean, I've sold animals at a show, and they came out later while I was still at my table with the animal that was dead.
What?
That's like, what do you do? I mean, was it just an accident? Did they leave the animal out in the dash of their car? You know, and it's like, you kind of wonder about it because it was obviously doing great when you brought it. So, you know, you got to refund their money, give them another animal, hoping that the same thing doesn't happen. Just, you know, it's a whole different thing once you go from doing it, you know, as a hobby to kind of doing it, you know, more as a business. You know, it's weird. And it's like that with anything, whether it's art or whatever like that. You may be really good at breeding snakes and understand the genetics and keeping them and everything, but that doesn't mean you're going to have the skills necessary to deal with people. You know, that's a whole other thing.
Do you feel like those bad encounters you had changed you as a seller, or you're just like, this is going to happen no matter what? Like, let me stay, or I don't know. Did it change how you sell or who you sell to, or more strict, all that kind of stuff?
Well, I mean, at the time it's like really frustrating. And then kind of like later on, you kind of like learn your lesson. And, you know, it's like I said, now it's kind of like nothing surprises me anymore. You know, what could happen. And it's weird because I think the same basic scenarios, I've seen them now that I do more art. It's almost like the same type of people, you know, they want me to draw them something, do a logo, whatever. And you do exactly what they want and they don't like it and they want a refund. And I'm kind of like, well, I don't get a refund on my time spent on that.
Right.
I spent 8 hours working on that, you know. But you kind of got to look at it, you know, is it worth
all the headache of them? Yeah.
Yeah, and you just kind of like just to shut them up. You know, it's almost like.
And you know there'll be a bad review in a group somewhere trashing you if something happens. You know, if you do give them that bad experience and don't kiss their ass 100%.
I mean, I had this. It was about a year ago. Somebody, I was designing a logo for them, and I thought it looked really cool. And I will say, the tricky thing with doing logos is you want to make the customer happy, give them something they like, but I also want to make something that I'm proud of and that will attract more business, you know, that looks really good. But you also have to look at it. What's the point of the logo? And it's ultimately to help them brand their business and generate sales. And so other people get it. So you got these three, you know, different things that you're juggling. But this one individual, I designed something for them. They didn't like it. I did a couple more. They weren't too happy with it. Well, I kind of moved on. I had someone else's I was working on, and I posted it, and they came back and told me they wanted something just like that. And I like literally jumped out of my chair and yelled at my computer because the first one I gave them they didn't like. I just changed the text and the color. It was the same layout and everything. And that's what they had. And I was like, you know, so I like doing the art sometimes because like the art, it's done, it's there. Logos, sometimes you'll spend 6 to 8 hours working on this logo and then they want all these changes. Or they'll like, hey, can you change this? And you change it and you send it for approval and then they want more changes. And then it's like, well, why didn't you tell me all this up front? We could have done it. But you can't tell them that.
Right.
And it's not to say that, you know, that's just a minority of people, but those are the ones that stick out. You know, you also get to people that are just happy and they kind of like, here's a rough idea of what I want. And you give it to them and they love it. And that's, you know, usually, you know, how it goes. But it gets frustrating sometimes. And then it, like, I get into a situation kind of where I'm in now where you kind of get behind and then people keep wanting changes and then that pushes everybody else back. So I'm kind of like, well, do I need to like put them on hold and work on these other ones? So I don't have, you know, 5 more people behind just because this other person's kind of being a little, you know, some of it's legit. You know, I'll admit I have spelled people's names wrong. You know, but that's really.
Hey, is that a dig at us?
No, like I had a graphic design job one time, and one of the first jobs I had, I spelled the name of the business wrong, and it was the people I worked for. It was something for them.
Yeah.
I hadn't even worked there a week, and they printed out thousands of these like brochures. And
it's also the person who, you know, you can't be the only person. You know, there's got to be other people down the line because you see it so often.
Somebody else should have caught it. Yeah.
You're seeing it so often that it probably looks normal to you.
Yeah. I mean, I will say the advantage on doing like logos, graphic design projects, it's a lot easier to change things that need change, you know, than if I did a painting, you know, somebody, you know, wanted something different. It's like I can't as easily go back and change it as I can, you know, go on the computer and, you know, change add an I in the name or something. But
I love that when people are just like, hey, I just need this and this done. And they act like it's going to take 10 minutes, but they don't know that it affects the whole project that you're doing. Yeah. As far as especially with graphic design and illustrations and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool because, you know, some of the people that I've had the pleasure of doing like logos with were people when I started out in the hobby that I really looked up to. And I kind of like feel like, you know, and kind of getting, you know, going in that direction. I'm really, you know, fortunate to be friends with Kathy Love. You know, most people know is kind of the ideas of the corn snake hobby. And I just think that's
we might utilize that.
Yeah, and you know that her, Don Soderbergh, people like that, Walter Smith. You know that it's you know I kind of tell people it's like I know that not everybody you know is into the reptile snakes or whatever like that, but from my perspective, from like a kid that was, all about catching snakes, and I had these people's books when I was, younger, and now, I just kind of like, casual conversations, hang out with them at shows, go out to dinner. To me, it's kind of like you're a kid playing basketball and like your buddies with Michael Jordan.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, even now I'm like, oh my God, you're friends with Kathy Love. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, you won't meet a sweeter lady than Kathy.
So I don't feel as bad asking her, because like I don't know if you saw, we posted on Corn Snakes about that woman Connie. I'm sorry, I forget her last name, but she did an experiment. Yes,
Connie Curley.
So she did an experiment with like tearing the pinkies, and I was looking at it because I was talking to like some of my chondro friends. We were talking about how chondros can't digest rats and all this stuff, and I was like, well, there's this study, this little experiment that this woman did to prove that corn snakes actually absorb, mice better because they're not used to digesting rodents, but if you slice them, they absorb them better because they can't get through the skin. So I was like, maybe there's some type of parallel, and I posted it up, and then Kathy Love's like, oh yeah, let me see what I can do for you, and then she got it, and I was like, fuck, that was sweet. Because like she went way out of her way
to go get the full study
someone she doesn't really know,
Yeah, and Connie's a vet, so she definitely knows what she's talking about. Her husband,
that's not just hobby science.
Yeah, he actually wrote kind of the book on corn snake morphology. He used to publish them every year. I think now, like a digital edition, it hasn't been updated in a while. But there's, it's a lot of good information. It's weird because most of the questions that I see, particularly like in corn snakes, because that's, what I specialized in, with like 3 books, I think would answer, 80 to 90 of the questions. Kathy's book, Don Soderbergh's book, and Chuck's Morph Guide. It seems like if people would just, spend, the 30, 40 bucks on those 3 books, there's pretty much, I don't know what better people to ask on those subjects.
But that doesn't tell me what morph I have when I have a blurry picture and a probably wild type.
Well, like I said, I had done some photo retouching, so I know that. And you remember the whole blue and gold dress thing a couple years ago when that was?
Yes, right. Yes.
I think that's a great example of the fallacy of posting a photo online and asking everybody else what it is. Especially, and it's not like a popular vote determines what it is. I mean, I've seen people answering the question, and I wonder, it's like, have you even seen any of that particular morph in person or kept them? It's like you just want to like be talking just to answer the question, and I don't know. But yeah, lighting, not only can that pay a difference, but even different web browsers will render colors differently. Then you
wow.
Right.
Different cameras are going to photograph, colors. And there's some, morphs of corn snakes, like the salmons. It's got the really pink background. They won't even show up.
Can't.
It's really hard to capture that. So you can give an idea of what it is and what it's definitely not. But, there's so many corn snake genetics now that are really, really close and are becoming more and more common, that there's going to be a lot of stuff popping up now that I feel sorry for people trying to figure out what it is. I mean, it's bad enough. Is this hypo? Is this a dark hypo or a light normal? I've seen some normals that were lighter than some hypos, but now you've got everything from hypo to like sun-kissed and ultra, dilute, strawberry, Christmas, all these other hypo, all these melanistic, reducing genes that kind of mimic each other, charcoal and annuries, another, common one. And those are really common. But you've got all this other stuff, how long until Castagna is going to pop up in somebody's collection unexpected, stuff like that. So
just subtle things that you don't know for sure. What do you want to say?
Okay, I have a couple things from the chat. By the way, we didn't explain that to him, but if we like say someone's random name, it's because they're popping up in our little like live stream chat.
I gotta pee while
and
this
they're asking questions.
Happens.
But before I ask their questions, in response to what you just said, especially for someone who's new into this like me, it's already hard to tell the difference. Like,
that's why we have Sarah.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say that too. Stop talking while you're peeing. To plug Sarah, she is awesome. What's her last name? Moore? Sarah Moore.
Yeah.
Do you know her?
I know Sarah well.
Like, literally can tell you any morph you're ever asking for. But like, even today, she posted a picture. Oh shit, I wish I could remember. I think she was like, can you tell the difference between these like snow opals and something else? And I'm like, no, I can't tell shit. Like, to me, like coral, an opal, and a snow all look the same.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, they're already so close. I can only imagine in 10 years, like, what it's gonna be like.
Yeah.
Unless you're like her or a step above me, like it's already hard to tell. But at the same time, I love corn snakes in that regard. For that, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, I think
in instances where I will hatch out something and I'm not sure what it is, if it could be this, or have this extra gene, if I'm not sure if it's an anery or a ghost, I'll just label it as an anery and let the buyer know it could be ghost. So at least that way, that seems like better to err on that side than to say I think it's ghost and it's not. So you kind of get something extra. But yeah, nobody knows. A lot of it is just guessing, and especially when you're looking at somebody else's photos, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, I have so much stuff that I didn't know what it was, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. That's usually the stuff I'd hold back, especially if something looked really weird. But and then you get instances where that's not even necessarily something genetic either. So
it just happened.
Well.
Okay, someone in the chat said, can you ask if he still keeps black rat snakes?
I've never really kept black rat snakes. I mean, I catch them a lot where I live, but not really since I was like a kid, and I would, keep wild ones for a while. Now there are a lot of morphs I would like to at some point. A lot of lavenders and the calico cow suckers, the really yellow looking ones, I think came out of Kentucky. There's a lot of interesting morphs, but I've never really kept black rats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's like white-sided as well. I saw.
Yeah, those are cool.
Like I grew up catching black rat in upstate New York. There's only like, as far as rat snakes go, there's black rats, and then you may, if you're lucky, like a ringneck snake and a whole bunch of garters. But like black rats were like the only big snake you could find, and they would be like 6 feet fucking monster black snakes. They were awesome.
Yeah, now you got the issue with some of the taxonomy now where back. Some of the taxonomy now where like black rats isn't even like a legitimate thing anymore. They kind of split them all into Eastern, Midland, and Western, and all
God forbid
northern part of the range. So
God forbid I call a Texas rat or a Western rat a Texas rat also down here in Texas, because now everything's Western rat. So if I say Texas rat, I get put up on the stake. I still
see that.
Yeah, but if you go on like the colubrid, the people who care.
Well, the unnamed man definitely calls them Texas rats.
Unnamed man. The one with, yeah.
And when I was in Tennessee, the rat snakes we found there were really distinct looking. They didn't look like any of the traditional subspecies. They were kind of like an olive green color, and they had like, markings. So I'm thinking that's kind of the traditional gray rat area, but they didn't look anything like a gray rat. So I don't know. And I found several of them like that, and I've got photos of them. If it was kind of like a locale or whatever, kind of middle Tennessee, but I always thought they were really cool just because they didn't look like anything that I was used to seeing. And that's another cool thing about, you go to different parts of the country and you find the same animal, but it looks really different.
Right.
I found like a lot of black king snakes in Tennessee where like it's supposed to be black king snakes in Southern Illinois, but everyone that I ever found looked like a speckled king. but like I said, the taxonomy is kind of weird. I'm not going to pretend like I'm a taxonomist. I find all the stuff interesting. But I always thought it was kind of weird how we kind of made these like distinctions on animals by the way they looked. When in the hobby, that's what most people are doing, is kind of like changing the look. So it's
Right.
kind of classifying by, I kind of felt like the mitochondrial DNA was kind of more objective in that sense. But like I said, that's not my field, so it's interesting, but I can't really say, one way or the other who's right on that.
Right. So what are you keeping as far as other than corns besides fox snakes?
Um, Really, I think mostly it's what I've got right now. I sold almost everything earlier this summer. Then I moved back to Illinois. Um, I kind of went through a divorce last year, and I just didn't really feel like keeping a bunch of animals. So I had a friend keeping them for about a year or so, and we kind of worked out a deal. And he was getting ready to send them back, and I just like, I didn't really know what was going on with where I was moving and everything, and so I ended up selling most of my collection to my buddy Tim in Miami, and I kept a few projects like my specters and heliconias, and then I got the fox snakes. I got a trio of het scalus at Tinley from my good friend Jim Stelpflug. Um, so hopefully this year I'm going to be building stuff back. But really, as of right now, I've just been so working on doing the art thing. And so the snakes are it's kind of funny. It went from like the art was kind of something on the side, and now it's kind of like, flipped around. But I'll probably still, get back into the snakes thing and keeping more stuff, building the collection back. I would like to work with more rarer North American rat snakes, like the Arizona greens. I've always loved those.
I don't even know what that looks like.
Then you know what? It's the Senicolus triapsis, the one that I keep on showing
Thank you.
you.
Speak
Almost
Latin.
like a green
That makes
corn.
me understand
Speak
it more.
Latin to me.
That totally makes me get it when you say Latin.
I'd love to get into some of the old world species too. I know there's a little bit more of they're not as easy as corns, not as forgiving,
But you don't want Bajas also?
Yeah, I have those. I made a post the other day about kind of, ask everybody what their top 5 was. And people have got like these really like stuff on there like cobras and like earless, monitors and all this stuff like that. And I'm like, I just want some more, Trans-Pecos rat snakes or something. I kind of felt like, yeah, but I don't know. Like I said, I just kind of want to I don't really want to like branch off and do something completely different, but at the same time, I kind of feel as far as like corn snakes, I'll always have, a lot of corns, but I kind of felt like kind of been there, done that. And I don't want to, again, go on to something completely different, but the fox snakes is something that I've always loved. And I've got a pair of Easterns. I'd like to get some Westerns and maybe, a couple more pairs of each, 2 pairs of each. Just because that's something you don't see a lot. And, they've got pretty much same cares, corn. So it's not like I'm getting into something completely different as far as care goes and setup and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I kind of feel, I want to keep animals, but at the same time, I'm kind of feeling like the art thing. I'm feeling like I'm kind of, as time progresses, I'm falling more into my niche.
Right.
Yeah. So,
I mean, I have this issue where everything's in brumation now, so I picked up like an Amazon tree boa, and I'm like, fuck, I want a lot of Amazon tree boas and like just silly shit because there's certain stuff that's up during the winter, and the more you work with something, the more you like it, kind of. So it's like, but yeah, I feel as far as like she wants a lot of the Asian rat snakes, but quite frankly, that's like just a whole nother like place in my mind to keep in comparison to North Americans or even a lot of pythons.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the cool thing about corn snakes is like once you get that down, that care is like applicable to like a lot of species,
a lot of stuff.
If you can keep a corn snake, you can keep most king snakes. The mountain kings might be a little different, but most king snakes, the pine bull gopher snakes, little bigger setup, for those guys that get a little heavier. I really like those guys. Milk snakes, stuff like that. Other rat snakes. You can kind of use the same. If you got that down, which is easy, of course, then you can kind of. Where if you get something like the Asian rat snakes or the Amazon tree boas, I don't really know anything about those. But I know you don't keep them like a corn snake, obviously, because from a different part of the world. But yeah, and it kind of reminds me that's one of the things you mentioned earlier. What's different about the hobby is when I got into it, people kept reptiles, and now it's kind of like you've got all these different almost cliques, communities.
Yeah,
I don't know anybody in the Amazon tree boa community really. I mean, I know a couple friends that have them.
We just got one.
We were talking about that, so I brought it up.
Shit. Okay. Never mind. Missed that part.
Or the blood pythons or stuff like that.
There's all these different worlds.
How everything's kind of splintered off, and it's grown so much, and it's got its good and it's got its bad with it. But I used to try keeping up with everything, and now it's just not possible. What all's going on. And I hate doing shows sometimes because I want to walk around and look at everything, and it's almost torturous where I'm like, there's all this cool stuff here, and my friends that I talk to online, I want to go talk to them in person, and I'm stuck behind a table.
That's why we drink beer and steal a friend's table and hang out there the whole day.
Yeah, I've got a 17-year-old daughter that usually goes with me to shows. She's been going since she was really, really young. And I'm like, hey, watch my table. And she'll kind of all right, he's going to be back in an hour. I get distracted. I go to ask somebody else, and then she's trying to find me or something like that. Somebody's got a question, but
I don't just go around once. I go around 2, 3, 4 times.
4 times. Every time it's a fucking 3-hour excursion. I feel like the boy shopping with the girl holding their purse.
Yeah, it's the female version of that. It's like me going to Victoria's Secret.
But it's worse. It's so much worse.
But we held a caiman. You didn't like that? The Trans-Pecos rats.
I liked the caiman, but I felt wrong about holding the caiman because it shouldn't have been there in the first place. So
any of you guys want to buy the worst pet ever? Why don't we put this in a 10-gallon?
And then they had the caimans next to a yellow anaconda, which
next to all the Amazons, which was I love you, but I can't have your parasite load right now in my face.
This all feels wrong.
That's why corn snakes are safe.
I wouldn't even buy a corn snake. They had a corn snake called red corn snake.
It was redder than the others. That's why it was a red.
I'm sorry.
Just some of them were more yellow. Some of them
PetSmart doesn't even call them red corn snakes. They call them
should have put fancy on there.
But if you're vending at a show, don't have something called red corn snake. Come on.
Yeah, I've had there was a couple posted this week already that I've seen where people are asking. I'm not going to name the vendor, but they're pretty well known, and somebody asked, what's a Neptune corn snake? And everybody's like, what? And
never heard of that.
Someone's about to pay $5,000 for something.
They described it and showed a picture, and apparently it was just a motley, like a pinstripe motley or something.
You call it motley, I call it a Neptune,
He used to say the person writing the labels misunderstood what somebody else said and wrote something wrong.
Imagine if you heard someone from far away, maybe Motley turns into Neptune.
I don't know.
And then, but that's hilarious. But there's so many different morphs out there. I don't think people understand when they see that table with 100 different species. This isn't exactly the best breeder in the world. It's not that they're the best breeder in the world and breed 100 different species.
Novices don't know that.
What do you do to educate a buyer at a reptile show? Or your snake is too expensive, I can go buy the red corn snake for $15 or whatever.
Yeah, I'm probably not the best person to ask on that. you know, obviously you can't say what you're thinking.
Yeah.
You know, you just kind of like, you know, nod your head and, you know, just kind of like, you know, I'm sure, you know, and that's one of the things, you know, you're breeding reptiles and there's somebody else that's going to be selling them cheaper. But you got to keep in mind too, you're not just buying that animal, you're buying that person's business in a sense. You know, there's a lot more to it. If you have a problem, you know, with that animal, are they going to be there to help you with it? You know, did they produce that animal themselves? You know, the way I look at like buying animals is unless it's something really, really odd and rare, I'm not as concerned about saving like $5, $10, $20 is who's producing it. If a good friend of mine has it and you know, somebody I don't know all that well has it and theirs is a little cheaper, I'm probably going to buy it from my friend because I know, you know, it. And that's kind of a thing I've read about business is like most of your customers are going to be repeat customers. And, you know, you do them good and they support you, you're going to return the favor. I mean, I've got people now like, you know, that have given me some like really awesome animals. I mean, it's just like unbelievable. Like some of the deals that I've get, you know, cause people know, you know, that stuff comes back around. And they're not as concerned as far as like making, you know, money sometimes as, you know, they are animals. So you want to, you know, you don't want to give them away because, you know, there's this weird thing where people are going to take care of an animal more often than not that they paid more money for. And that's unfortunate that normal corn snake isn't going to get the same amount of care probably as that palmetto.
Right. That's why it's like so much easier to sell to someone you already know. And that's why like people always ask me, hey, like I thought this person was breeding this and then available or whatever, or how'd you get this? Well, I was like, well, like my friend bred it and that's how I got it. Because honestly, like once you start to know people, you kind of get first pick before it even gets out there. So it's like, that's a really important part of our hobby for people to know.
I mean, I breed snakes for myself. I'm my best customer. And so the stuff that I don't keep, you know, my friends get or we trade, you know, and then after that, it kind of goes public. And then you got the other step where it's just stuff, you know, a lot of amels, snows, byproducts and stuff like that. You end up wholesaling and stuff like that. And it's unfortunate because, you know, not every animal you produce is going to end up, you know, in the best care. You know, that's something that people just kind of have to consider too. It's unfortunate, but that's kind of the reality of it too. So,
I mean, you see some breeders, I mean, they rationalize it in the fact of, you know, you're kind of doing agriculture, you're breeding, you're almost farming in a sense. So it's like not every, like Eugene Bissett would say, not every tomato makes it to the salad bar. So unfortunately, maybe not every snake makes it to the tub or wherever the tub is passed.
Yeah, I mean, I've referred to my animals before as livestock. I didn't really consider them pets because to me, pets have names. And most of I don't even know if any of my animals, my reptiles, have names. They've got ID numbers. I've got a cat with a name, but you know, it's like pets you don't sell. You know,
right.
So I don't know. I mean, you know, and I really wouldn't put like a cat or dog in the same as like a snake or a gecko or something like that. I mean, call me a speciesist. I don't know. I just
there's a certain level of consciousness that you get with a warm-blooded animal that you certainly don't get with a cold-blooded animal.
Right. And
most of them, at
least. Not
least.
to say I want to see, you know, the cold-blooded animal in any less than ideal, you know, being mistreated or anything like that. But at the same time,
you got to be realistic.
Yeah, it's, you know, just...
Unfortunately, it's part of what we do. But I felt like I had something to say and I just forgot. Maybe I've been drinking too much.
No, I just got lost into the chat. Someone I had to tell them they're about to get blocked from the chat.
Hey. Kids get real squirrely when you give them shit to...
Squirrely is not even the word. They get very, very dirty.
Oh, you know what I had to say? Okay.
Wait. How did me saying dirty remind you of what you had?
Because this shit's gonna get a little dirty. I wasn't sure if this was. I don't want you to take a stance because I bet people don't know the people who are in play, but you probably know the people who are in play. But palmettos, so we know that approximately the people who produce.
This up again. We brought it up so many times.
Get a fucking opinion, but palmettos, we know about 10% of them come out bug-eyed or so. Random percentage, but people, the market, no, not. But the market. Do you sell those animals? Do you cull those animals? What do you do with those animals, and how do we approach it going forward?
Yeah, from my understanding, like the bug-eyed trait isn't something that you're ever gonna like completely weed out. It's kind of something that's tied into leucistic snakes. So I've seen. I don't know if I get annoyed or I just get amused at this point with the whole allegations of palmettos coming from Texas rat snakes. And I'm like, have you ever seen a Texas rat snake covered with like spots? Because I haven't. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. But on your question, on something like that, I think once the price on those things comes down, people would probably cull them. But knowing that you could probably still get 4 figures,
$500 or
$500 at least,
whatever.
But it kind of gets to the point where that doesn't mean is the animal suffering because its eyes are larger?
No,
I don't know. Not that I'm aware of. Some people could say the same thing about the gene itself. It's missing, melanin. Is that any worse than its eye? Look at domestic breeds of dogs and stuff like that.
I'm missing a lot of melanin.
Yeah. So
yeah, you're struggling.
I'm struggling with my melanin.
You get sunburns. I don't. Yeah, I'm a better species.
Yeah.
You're more adapted to the sunlight.
Yeah.
I think it's hard.
Like an albino vampire. Myself.
Hey, you're darker than he is.
In this light, it's the light. Damn
you got a little tan there.
But I don't know. I mean, if I had palmettos and I hatched out bug-eyed ones, what would I do?
Yeah.
It's hard to say. I mean, we can like theorize what we would do, but if somebody's offering you, if you had 2 of them and somebody offered you $1,000, I'll be honest with you, it'd be hard to say no. But especially if I don't, now if we knew for 100% that the animal was suffering, I think that's a little different. But really, at this point, it's just aesthetics. I mean, there are people who like bug-eyed leucistic rat snakes. So, I mean, I have culled corns that weren't feeding. I've put them, fed them off to king snakes that I've had. Because sometimes that is
she hates when I do that.
No, that's not what I was saying. So we've done that. I get grossed out, but I understand it's life cycle shit. But
life cycle.
That's not what I meant.
Hashtag life cycle.
That's not what I meant. Like, what's the expression? Something of life.
No, you're good.
Circle of life. Thank you.
We're just living in a simulation of the Lion King. Yeah.
So unless somebody can show me, that those animals are like in fact suffering, which to the best of my knowledge they're not. I don't really think it's my place to tell somebody that they should or shouldn't sell them. I'm curious if anybody, and I'm sure it's been done with leucistic Texas rats, breeding 2 bug-eyed ones together has produced more or a greater number of them. If it's just something that occasionally happens, I don't know how those genetic works. I just know that that's something that is just kind of connected to leucistic, that gene, no matter what species it's in, that happens in snakes at least. So, it kind of reminds me of, kink snakes. I personally don't think kinking is genetic. In my experience, it has to do more with problems with incubation. Keeping it too humid in there. I've seen snakes with like their bodies fused together, a couple kinks, a lot of kinks and stuff like that. Now there's a thing going on corn snakes. It's believed that it's somehow connected to lavender, and it might be, but that's not been my experience with lavender. I never noticed a higher propensity for kink snakes in lavender.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I don't think kinking is necessarily genetic either. But I've never bred two kink snakes together to see, what happened from that. Mostly because
I don't believe it's genetic either. I mean, I think
if I was going to keep a pair of kink snakes and that's a pair of something else I can't keep, and so it didn't seem like
it's stupid
trade to me. But
if it's connected to humidity or whatever, why?
Well, there's some genes like no, that was me trying to interject.
It sounded like a fart.
But I was like caramel albinos and ball pythons certainly are genetically kinked. It's a mutation that's linked to the kink. But in corn snakes, I don't know of any of that out.
But if it's humidity, they all underwent.
Well, it can be also temperature swings, in my opinion.
But they all were affected. It doesn't make sense to me if they were all affected by this.
Well, a certain degree of our snakes can come out kinked. But it's like, why does that happen?
One or two snakes have. I feel like if they're all
under the same conditions, but they're not in the same.
If it's a humidity thing, they should all have it, right? To me, if it's a genetic thing, that makes sense that only one gets it because of the percentages. But if they're all affected by the same humidity, they should all have that kink.
I mean, it could be a combination. Maybe something the genetics of one make them less acceptable to environmental stresses.
That could also be it.
Now, Chuck and Connie, who had mentioned earlier, that did like the slicing the pinkies. They also, I think it was them, proved that you can stress the temperatures during incubation on corn snakes and alter their pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember off the top of my head, what extreme that was, if they were kept cooler or warmer or just kind of abruptly went from one extreme to the other. But that was something else that, they had shown.
Yeah, I mean, you see that in ball pythons. People call it jungle pattern, but really they just had a spike in incubation or something like that. And
right.
I mean, maybe that's where zigzag originated, but I don't really know. Would you know?
Yeah, that's something I've noticed that there's some I just call them aberrant corn snakes where the pattern you can get a zigzag where it's not genetic. Now, I did work with a line of Aztec corns years ago, and I did a lot of selective breeding with those, and I pretty much what I called a wide stripe corn snake that had this thick stripe that, went down most of their body, and that was something that was genetic. It was polygenetic, so it wasn't like a simple recessive or dominant trait or like that, but I had shown that I could breed them to a normal pattern corn snake and get a few with kind of weird patterns. But if I bred two of the more extreme ones together, then all those babies came out more extreme patterns as well.
So you think that it can originate with a spike in temperature, but you can pass on that gene polygenically line breeding after that?
Yeah, I think there's probably they're not the same trait. They just look visually different. So you got some corns that have like stresses during incubation that'll alter their pattern. And then there's some that are, same thing with like, Motley and Diffused are two, and Striped are corn snakes that will kind of wipe the belly typically free of any checkerboard pattern. But I've also produced snakes that weren't any of those that didn't have belly patterns. I never went on to prove if that was something different or just, an anomaly or whatever. But yeah, there's a lot on genetics that people, it's like reptile breeders unfortunately get hung up. Sometimes they don't go past Punnett squares. That's like, this is recessive, this is dominant, incomplete dominance. There's no true co-dominance that I'm aware of. That's a term that gets thrown around a lot. It's incomplete dominant. Right. But there's a lot of other weird, crazy things that can happen, like a null allele. I don't know if you've heard of that, where it's basically, one of the mothers or the fathers, that are contributing to that doesn't work. So it's basically a het, but it's showing because that dominant, it's not, it doesn't work. I've seen.
You're confusing me.
And that's just one example of all kinds of like crazy, that you get into sex-linked mutations and stuff like that. there was a study going on a few years ago with cinder corn snakes and how that was kind of sex linked. And I know there's a lot of that in ball pythons with like bananas, I think it is, just bits and pieces of things heard. So there's all kinds of weird genetic stuff that it's always surprised me with the amount of dedication and even money that people spend on the hobby. You would think they would kind of like get more into the genetics and try to pick that apart and figure it out, I think if we had a better understanding of that, it could lead to a lot of cool, new things that we wouldn't see otherwise.
But it's so confusing.
I think it's really hard, especially in corns after, 20 years of breeding recessive to recessive, and everything has a million hets that you don't know what it is. So it's like,
right.
It's hard to delineate everything to breed it back to a wild type and try to get all the hets out of it and try to know it's just so hard at this point. Everything's so muddy.
Yeah. I've got an idea that it's probably controversial. Imagine that. But back on the hybrid thing, I really believe, and this has been documented in other species, especially with plants, but I know it's been done with fruit flies. I'm not sure about other vertebrates for sure. I was looking into it one time, that hybridizing animals can be the genesis for genetic mutations. Two examples that I would cite, particularly with corns, would be the ultra and the scaleless. Now, I don't think that the original scaleless corn was just like one surviving egg from that clutch. And I don't remember which is which, but there was an emery rat, which is really closely related to a corn snake, and then a corn snake. And from that pairing, that one egg that survived was the first scaleless, and all scaleless corns descended from that animal. Now, I don't think either of those animals were hets, which seems to be what a lot of people assumed, because if they were, all the breeder had to do was, breed those to the same species, and we'd have pure of both. So the fact that it happened makes me think that it would, at some point, every mutation's got to have where it started. Something happened. Same thing with ultra. It's widely accepted that the ultra corn snake came from breeding a corn snake to a gray rat snake. But where are the ultra gray rat snakes or the pure ultra corn snakes, or so from some of the hybridization stuff that I've been reading where this has been done, like I said, especially with plants and fruit flies and other stuff, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a geneticist either, and this might be a question someone else could offer a lot more insight than I can. If it's like,
we've got a guy.
If it's the genes are like so close, the chromosomes or however it works, and something just kind of gets knocked off, how that works. But a lot of times with hybrids, that first generation will all look the same, and they'll look somewhere between both parents. But once you breed those F2s, or you get the F2s from breeding the first generation's hybrids together, you get all kinds of crazy stuff. And I always wonder, maybe a lot of that stuff we're just attributing to hybrid variation could be genetic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but it's something that I've always, I would love to at some point do something like that. I just don't know if it would be.
And it's so weird that we only really, this is very specific to like corn snakes and a lot of the rat snakes that are pretty closely related in comparison to, say, there's no, African rock berm, hybrid mutation. I just wonder why it's largely seen in, your ultramels, your scaleless, your emerys to corns.
I can't say on like the pythons because I don't know enough about them. But who's to say there's not, and not every mutation is, like I said, color or pattern. There could be other stuff too. And another thing that fascinates me is like, we only see certain colors. There's, the ultraviolet light that reptiles and birds, I believe, see in. So maybe there's some other colors of, there's other mutations that we can't detect, that are going on visually that they can see.
And it's also what's accompanying the pattern and color. Like, do some mutations have less hardiness because it also mutated the way their internal organs are or something? Or we have babies that maybe not visibly but they die anyway, or they have digestive issues. Like there's so many things we can't see.
Yeah. I mean, let's say one time, it's kind of off subject, but it made me think of it. I hatched a corn snake that was missing the top half of its head. It had all of
what?
And it stopped. It stopped kind of after the brain. There was no eyes, no front part of it, the jaw. It didn't make it out of the egg. There was that was the only egg left.
How?
In several days. So I have a habit of just kind of like opening the egg, just out of curiosity. And I did that, and I seen this weird thing, and then the tongue started flickering out. And it was like, I've got video of it. I've never shared it just because it's really, strange. I ended up euthanizing the animal. I mean, there's no way realistically this animal would have made it long term. But it was like the craziest thing. It's like no eyes or anything. It was like the brain, and that was the end of the top half of its skull and all the bottom jaw.
Yeah.
But the brain was fully formed.
Yeah, and the tongue was still moving out and everything, and it was.
Oh.
But that's just that you breed enough animals, you're gonna have weird anomalies. You know, sometimes you can luck out, produce something, cool, and sometimes it's nothing, that you want.
And
to
do you?
I mean, Don Soderberg proved several years ago that there was a eyeless mutation in corn snakes that was genetic. Obviously, he didn't go on to sell those, thankfully. I mean, he's
Wait, so what did he isolate the gene from? Where did it originally come from?
I don't know if it came from his stock, but it's something we talked about one time, and I'm sure he probably weeded it out of his collection.
You just leave it there. He's responsible. You just leave it there.
Yeah, I mean, there's I've heard that there was people at Daytona years ago selling like a kiddie pool of two-headed turtles, which from my understanding, like the turtles, they raise them on farms and they have so many eggs that they get a fair number of them, but ethical issue,
And how often are those successful? Especially with snakes, right. We see very, very low percentage.
Yeah, I mean, who knows if I wouldn't think something like that would be genetic, but I don't know. It's you kind of get into the whole thing of like how far is too far. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't like morphs.
That's stupid.
Well, not exactly. I mean, you could see that these are animals that wouldn't survive in the wild. So maybe their idea is that if an animal doesn't survive in the wild, it shouldn't survive in captivity.
But if you're going to do all that, then you're just against keeping. I feel like you need to just.
But it's weird because I have like lime bred jungle carpets that in the wild they would be dark goldish, brownish, and black, but now they're bright ass fucking yellow. There's no mutations involved, but they're so far from the natural form and wouldn't survive in the wild. It's like
right. That might as well be a mutate. If you're against mutations, you should be against line breeding for certain shit. I just feel like.
I mean, it's kind of weird because, and I've had this discussion before, and I don't know if the person even took it seriously, but it was like, mutations and stuff like that can have an evolutionary advantage. So, would being an albino, an AML, or whatever like that, in the wild, that probably wouldn't have an advantage, in most cases at least. Ironically, though, in captivity it does, because more breeders are reproducing them. So what would be an advantage in the wild? It kind of, I guess what I'm getting at, it kind of depends upon the setting. You know what I mean? And that's, somebody's like, oh, these, they don't like scaleless snakes because they wouldn't survive in the wild. Even though there's been adult scaleless and, lots of species of snakes found. But I tried to make the argument that, scaleless has the evolutionary advantage because keepers are breeding and making more of them. And
then in captivity, and like even comparison to the ball python scaleless, not the best. It doesn't have ventral scales. The ventral scales seem to be super fucking important.
Well,
if you're gonna have a scaleless snake,
I seen that there's now a micro scale ball python where the scales are smaller, and I guess a lot of people didn't know that there's been a micro scale corn snake for over a decade now, I think. Or close to it at least, but it's by a breeder, I think, in the Netherlands.
I was about to say, I thought I saw someone in Europe post something.
Yeah, I seen one recently in one of the forums or groups on Facebook, and it just never really caught on for whatever reason. But I don't
Does
know.
it seem to be recessive, or the incomplete dominant form is totally scaleless, or is that proven out?
I would be curious to see what happens when they breed a microscale to a scaleless. You know what? I mean, for all we know, we can produce one with larger scales where it looks like a pine cone or something. I don't know. But
that's if I get an armor-plated corn snake, I'm all for it.
Yeah, that's kind of the cool. Who knows? Like 50 years, if the reptile hobby's still around, hopefully, I mean, look at the stuff we've got now. I would have never imagined when I got into it.
Right.
Some of the bright fluorescent colors that we've got, the scaleless stuff. That's another one. So who knows? Are we going to have like emerald green and like bright blue snakes? I mean, it's possible. Who knows? Something totally different.
I mean, it seems like every species there's like a different color. Like it's really hard to get a blue ball python, but eventually there'll be a blue one or a straight up blue corn snake. Blue is really hard to get, but I think eventually the rate of mutation will just keep on happening, and we produce so many that we're eventually going to get mutants that are just shit that we can't even imagine right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's no really blue animals. I mean, as far as like a chromatophore that's like producing blue, it's usually like a weird trick with the light, like on a blue jay and stuff like that, just the way that the light's reflecting it. It's not actually, like the reds and yellows and stuff like that. But whatever causes it, it's theoretically possible. So, I'm kind of excited to see what happens. Like I said, I never would have thought 20 years ago we'd have the stuff we have now. So, and the way stuff grows exponentially, it may not be that long.
And it's just crazy even that, we could find something like palmetto in the wild, like that survived long enough, but obviously had crazy traits to...
I mean, who knows what people found that, they didn't know,
they
like
don't know.
100 years ago, or 200 years ago when people were like, some early pioneer or Native American was out and found some weird, now we have the advantage of we can post a picture of it on the internet and somebody's going to give you an insane amount of money for it with such a brief snapshot in time. Who knows? There's, blue garter snakes. So I don't see why that couldn't somehow, show up in corns, just whether by chance or selective breeding.
It's possible. And someone here in East Texas found in a very certain location, a scaleless Texas rat. And I was like, fuck, man, I wish I had that just to have location specific Texas rats, but that's kind of a random thing.
Where did they find it?
In East Texas, so somewhere kind of near here. But what are you going to say? I got to pee again.
Okay. Yeah, I had to pee again too. Oh, wait, shit, I just lost it. Joe told me not to ask this question earlier, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
I didn't think you had.
Ask if you've ever kept... I don't even know how you pronounce this. Dry Macron? Marcon?
Like indigo snakes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never kept indigos. I think they're cool snakes, but from what I understand, they're a lot of work. They like to poop, and they're really big. Basically, like a giant garter snake is kind of how I think of them in my mind.
Okay.
No, I've got some friends that work with them, and I have a lot of respect. Largest genus of the largest snakes in North America, and they're protected. But no, I've never kept it myself. It is one of those things. It's like from the people that I've talked to, they do require a lot of cage cleaning. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Intelligent snakes too. So I have respect for people that specialize in that.
In intelligence.
Other than doing some art with indigos, that's the closest I've came.
I got turned off because the Orient Society did a study on them, and it turns out that within a year they actually span like a good amount of space as far as like a few miles a year. So I mean, at least 1 mile a year. So I felt bad if I was going to keep him in like a 4-foot enclosure. I don't know. I don't know. That's stupid because corn snakes probably fucking travel that long too. But you know, science hasn't said so. So I'll keep them in a 24 quart tub. You know, whatever.
And the ones in our tubs aren't moving that much, like
because they don't have to. I guess
they sit still.
That's the advantage. Chilling. Yeah. Do you have any other questions?
And especially ours. I don't know. I mean, obviously you're in a way different place, but for the last 2-3 months, I feel like 90% of our corn snakes have hung out on the cool side.
That's what tub. I was wondering if you've seen the same thing. As far as we brumate, just because we don't have space, because we have like an outdoor storage area, I can only brumate my adult corn snakes. So I have like 30 corn snakes in the brumation, but I keep a lot of my yearling and holdbacks up here, but they still go to the cool side of the cage pretty much all the winter, and I don't feed them as much, and everyone's cool. Like, do you find that they kind of try to brumate themselves?
I've never, like, when I would brumate my animals, I usually just kept them in the basement, and I don't know if I necessarily had like a cool and warm side of, you know, the container, you know, tub that I was keeping them in. I just, you know, kind of monitored the room, and that's how I've always kept my animals. You know, I'd keep them in a spare bedroom in the warmer times of the year and heat it with an electric oil-filled heater. So I've never really paid much attention during brumation. I kind of jokingly referred to it as my, you know, snake vacation or snakecation, because it was like the 3 months of the year where I could kind of like, you know, relax, and I couldn't wait. I could, you know, because you'd have all these babies coming out, and it was so much work, you know, because I had a full-time job, and then I'd come home and I'd have at least 4 hours every night of feeding the babies and the adults and shipping and all that. So, you know, when winter came around, it's kind of like, okay, I get a break. And then right before I'd bring them up, I'd start missing them. And I was like, oh, I can't wait to bring them up again. So it kind of, that's one advantage I've always loved about colubrids, is it kind of gave me a nice little break. But no, like I said, I would try to aim for, you know, kind of like the low to mid 50s. You know, and make sure that they got clean water and stuff like that. But I never really noticed any, you know, they were on one side of the tub or the other.
Are you? Okay.
So you're saying you brumated everything? Is that what you're saying?
I not usually like the babies that were born that year.
Okay.
Keep up just so I could get more size on them. Now, I have done an experiment years ago where I had babies that wouldn't feed, and I put them down for about a month, and I brought them out, and some of them actually did feed. I don't know if that was coincidence or that had something to do with it. It kind of reset something, but, you know, it's something that if you've got babies late in the year, it's certainly worth a try, at least. And I've also bred corns, and I didn't brumate them. You know, one year I had like 60, 70 females, and I didn't brumate them. And I you know, I still produce, you know, over 1,000 babies that year. But like I said, it's a nice break, and it certainly saves on your mouse bill. So, you know, why not? But I realize there's sometimes situations, you know, if you're in an apartment or something like that, which I guess there's something to be said if you've got hundreds of snakes in an apartment, but where you just can't brumate them. It's not necessary with corns, at least. But who's to say, you know, after a couple of years of not brumating them, maybe it would have more of an effect. But
do you know, I mean, there's a few different trains of thought, but some people are very strict about your 55 degrees. And quite frankly, when I lived in New York, I did, you know, 50 to 55. But here in Texas, it swings. And I personally don't care if it swings that much, because I read the Love book and they kept their garage door open, and, you know, the Florida weather. So are you careful not to get above 55 degrees or?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have some warm days. And I don't think if, you know, you got 1 or 2 days, it's not really going to be an issue. Where you get into a problem is like for an extended period of time, you know, you don't want a week of 60 degrees, because that's kind of like the danger zone of it's not cold enough for them to kind of go into that, you know, brumation mode, but it's not warm enough for them to kind of function, you know, ideally either. And if that was going to be an issue, I would just go ahead and warm them up. You know, I would, better to not brumate them if you can't, or if it turns out you couldn't too long. So yeah, if that was going to be an issue, just skip brumation and warm them up.
Mm-hmm. So you're believing that you can't keep them at, because I've even kept them as far as I drop them. I just turn thermostats off and stop feeding, and I'll stop feeding and then bring up the rate of feed, and then they act like it's spring. I have triggered them other ways besides temperature, so I've triggered them feeding wise. So I wasn't sure if that's a reasonable way to go about.
Right. Yeah, and I've heard stories of people, with various species where they've moved to different parts of the country and they kind of lost a year in production. And I'm sure the animals are more sensitive of, whether it's temperature differences, humidity, barometric pressure, who knows, all kinds of little things that we may not notice ourselves. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to move from different parts of the country, just be prepared that might be something that, you have to anticipate, that you're going to lose a year or your production is going to go down significantly. And it's something to consider. I guess if you're, importing animals, if you're in Florida and you're buying animals from someone, on the West Coast, those animals themselves might be a little off. So,
or even, people buy imports from Indonesia or something, and obviously the seasons are flip-flopped, so people are like, oh, I'm gonna get this and breed this then, but the seasons
you get all kinds of issues there. I mean, wild caught with parasites, and who knows how they were shipped here and how they were captured and all kinds of stuff. I mean, that's a whole nother level right there of difficulty.
Kind of random, but have you ever had to travel with babies? Or not babies, excuse me, with eggs?
I had moved one time, and I had several. I mean, it wasn't far. It was maybe 30 minutes away. And I probably had, I don't know how many eggs, probably like 30 or 40 clutches at that point. I've got a photo of it, actually. I came across it the other day on my computer. But I've got all these eggs. It's not something that I would recommend, because you really don't want to move reptile eggs too much. And, you don't want to, your incubator is probably going to be a little more, hopefully, stable than moving them out in your car, especially in the summer, when the eggs are incubating. Around here, it'd be like July or so, which, sometimes it might be 90 degrees or so. You turn the air conditioning on your car, how cool is it in your car now? But yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. But
yeah, we're moving in July, and I'm very nervous.
Yeah, it's like I said, that's just one of the things I would tell anybody. Just prepare that things aren't going to go like they should in the book. That's just not that you shouldn't strive for that, but life. I mean, I would probably be the poster boy for that. I seem to attract the crazy. I swear sometimes my life is scripted by some of the craziness that happens, and I just kind of try to roll with it now. But it's you kind of plan for the best and expect the worst.
Well, as far as planning for the best, if you were moving 21 hours away,
that's a little different
with eggs, what would you do?
If I were going to do that, I would find someone local, fairly local, where the eggs are laid, and let them incubate the eggs, and once the babies are hatched, have them ship the babies to you. That's what I would do.
Personally. That's actually a good idea.
Do we have someone?
If you're in Texas,
yeah, we could.
You probably find somebody. I know Texas has got a pretty good reptile community. Someone that you trust. But yeah, I wouldn't go that far with eggs. I mean, even with adult animals, that was like one of the stressful things. I would joke about going to shows with all these animals. I'm like, what if I had a car accident, and then the paramedics are drawing straws? There's a guy
like shit,
out, and I'm covered in this mass of snakes. I guess if I'm when I go out, that's kind of I guess that'd be a cool way to do it. But
I'd say catch all the snakes first and then worry about me later. I don't really care.
Well, you can't tell them that if you're dying.
Paramedics don't care. I mean, but they're gonna have an interesting story.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that makes me even more nervous for us moving.
Are you put the eggs on top of the racks guy, or are you incubator?
To be honest with you, I used to just set them on top of my kitchen cabinets until I ran out of kitchen cabinet space. But yeah, most homes are kind of kept within that, where it just happens to be that ideal temperature up there. At the top, your ceiling, the heat rises. I eventually ran out of cabinet space, so then I just started setting them on top of my racks. I've never ever done the incubator thing. I've seen some really cool stuff where people convert, mini fridges and all this kind of stuff. I'm not an electrician. So, and I've had, my philosophy, if it works, that's good enough for me. So no sense to make anything more complicated.
Yeah, I think we were gifted with the ease of incubation, so why not just make your life easy and keep them, I mean, although I did the warmest place I can get them was 74 this year. It took 90 days, so that's a little bit longer than usual. If you want your eggs to come out fast, don't put them at 74 degrees.
I'm going to run to the bathroom real quick. 2 beers.
Yeah,
go for it.
I'll be right back.
We can talk.
Okay, someone said, why not just have a little generator in the car to keep the incubator on?
Yeah, we could definitely, as far as when I moved all my adult snakes in Colorado, I did have heat hooked up, and then I had a converter to hook up a thermostat in the car and keep it 75 degrees just because. So, I mean, I could definitely see that kind of
you would just do it at a lower temperature for the babies, or for the eggs, or would you
I would do, I would try to keep it 80 degrees or whatever my room, because I'm going to have them ambient in where all the adults are. So we're probably going to be running 80 to 82.
So you can drive in a car for 21 hours. It's 80 degrees.
No, it won't be the whole car. It will be, I will set up an insulated box if that's the case. But it would be sweet if someone was here to hatch them all out and send them out. But my only issue with that is I may not have a lot of the animals may not be technically expensive enough to do. I mean, I would lose a lot of money in the process either way.
How much is that?
Either I lose a lot of babies or I lose a lot of money. I don't think it matters which. I mean, no, that's not true. I want to hatch out as many. I want to hatch out as many eggs as possible.
But that also sounds expensive to have someone ship us babies.
I know it's hard either way.
We're gonna have 200 babies. That's so expensive.
I mean, if I can really, I don't know if I can really figure something out as far as hooking up a thermostat, but if I could, I mean, that would be great, but it's not going to be as straightforward. It will be something where it's half of them are going to be gravid and half of them are going to have already laid, and it's going to be a fucking mess.
Oh, why are we moving in July?
Yeah. It's never fun, in the middle of summer or winter.
Mm.
I've done it. Yeah,
right.
Especially with animals. And you got to consider too, if you have vehicle problems, what are you going to do?
Shit.
Yeah, if a car breaks down and then I'm depending on that car to keep some sort of thermostat running on it, it's going to be a shit show. But once we get past this year, I mean,
no,
move ever again.
I think even if if I was moving that far, honestly, what I would do is leave your animals with someone you trust, and have them ship you the animals once you get there.
That's gonna be so expensive, though.
Yeah, well, you also got to consider, though, like I said, if something happened, most people don't plan on having.
That's expensive, also,
or something like that, and if it was a couple animals. You could probably pack them in a cooler and stuff like that. I don't know. Like I said, I had a friend come.
No, we're gonna have.
And pick up my animals, and he took them from Tennessee to West Virginia. I think there was 40 or so adult corn snakes, and maybe half a dozen garter snakes or so. But I don't know. It wasn't 21
I
hours.
did.
I know that.
Yeah.
I did Colorado or New York to Colorado, and a pine snake got out and a green tree python got out, which like isn't the best combo. But,
in your car?
Yeah, no, it was like in a bin that I all had them in, and I tried to temperature control the bin, which I mean it worked for the time being, but I don't really love having a pine snake out with a green tree python and all this weird shit and putting all my snakes in one bucket. But I had a lot less snakes.
I once lost a Midland water snake in the dash of my car, an adult that got out and went up in the dash. And it was like in August, I think.
Oh my God.
And we spent like 3 hours, like, on our head trying to like look up there and get this, and water snakes don't have the best disposition sometimes. And finally I gave up, and I was working second shift at the time. And I was like, well, I'll just leave my windows, cracked or whatever. It wasn't terribly hot out, and I'll just go check on my breaks, lunch, whatever, see if he comes out. Well, I hit some railroad tracks on my way to work, and I guess that kind of scared him and fell out. So I immediately stopped the car, and there was these guys working on the road. And so they see this car like all of a sudden stop, and this guy like gets out and like bends down and pulls out this like 3-4 foot water snake, and it's all writhing around and everything. And it was the same county at least where I caught it. And I just kind of like, there was ponds and stuff, out in the country, kind of like tossed him out there, relocated him.
This must have ventured into my car.
Yeah, I'm sure that was something, gave them something to talk about. But so, yeah, you don't want a snake going in your dash. It's the moral of the story.
No. You want to keep everyone under wraps as much as possible.
I don't know if there was a hole in the bag or I didn't have it tied right or what. Why I even had a water snake, I don't know. I think it was one of those, I kept him for a while back before, I got into the breeding corns and all that. And I was just, hey, here's something cool. I'll keep it for a while. And kind of had the whole like little zoo kind of thing going on with like native species or whatever,
right.
Setups. And I don't know. I get that probably.
You're like, what's the least fun thing I could keep?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like I said, now I can't even. I see a water snake and I'm like, yeah, it's a water snake. I'm not even gonna, if it's like rat snake, king snake, something like that, I'll, catch it, just, get some pictures, whatever. Water snakes, racers are just kind of those. I'm just like, it's not worth the,
Down here we have those like, what are those broadbandeds or whatever those really like flame red, orange water snake with black on them. They're like the only cool water snakes, but I would keep those, but they're still probably terrible. I still probably would never keep them actually, but
yeah, I mean, like I said, I kind of see them as, garter snakes. I've kept a lot of garter snakes and they're kind of flighty sometimes. I had this one, it was like a T positive Eastern, and it was like the coolest looking garter. But every time I opened that snake's tub, it shot out and would like go across the room. I don't think I ever, fed it, watered it, whatever, spot cleaned it without it getting out of its tub. It was, and so like, I would always do him laugh because I would spend most of my time chasing him across the room.
Yeah, I do the same thing with through the chain of a python. I've opened the enclosure and then I let it out. I let him roam around the room, but he's pretty big. But he got behind the mattresses. I had to throw some stuff around. It was earlier.
Was I gone?
Yeah, when you were gone. Remember, it was dirty before. Now it's clean. Aren't you happy?
Yeah.
A lot of effort to clean that one fucking tub, man. Yeah, they're not. What are they? He's giant, man.
He's giant. Okay.
It's not like a corn snake that would get lost in a second.
Yeah. Well, the first corn snake I got, like I said, I got him when I was 16. I had him for a month, and he got out. And when he got out, it was like August. And then the following March, my uncle next door found him under a railroad tie, and knew the snake was really weird looking. That it wasn't something he'd normally come across. And I got home from school, and he was sitting there in a bucket on my front porch. And like I said, that was the one I went on. I had him for 20 something years after that. And I actually used that snake, a silhouette of him on like all my different, projects, from like my art to my snake breeding logo or whatever. Just because, like I said, he was kind of what started it all with me and corns. So
yeah, I had a similar one with one of my first. It got out like the year before, and we caught it the next spring somehow. But like my dad caught it in the backyard, and we saw it when we were in the pool. But that's a whole nother. Like, it's crazy how they'll
he was
survive.
bigger and everything. It was awesome
Yeah.
with him because there's no albino corn snakes in Southern Illinois. There might be now. I mean, I'll be honest, I've had stuff get out, babies that I never showed up. So I'm hoping I didn't establish any. I would joke about that sometimes too, that, if a tornado ever hit, every time the tornado sirens would go off, I'm like, well, this could be bad. Indigenous species now. But that never happened, fortunately. So.
I mean, that's like the first thing I tell people is these things are small. Make sure they're secured. They're hard to keep under wraps when it's a baby corn snake. They pretty much always get out if you give them an opportunity, which is terrible. They're almost impossible to recover.
Total side. Well, I can talk in my mic. Total different conversation. I don't even know if you know the answer, but someone asked you, how much room does an adult ATB need?
Okay, that's way off subject, but an adult Amazon tree boa can grow up to 6 feet. I mean, you're going to want at least a 4-foot enclosure if you can do good shelving and stuff in there. So, I mean, they're not necessarily arboreal as far as they're going to perch like a green tree or anything like that. But you're going to want shelves, or they usually want like at least 3 points of contact to stay on. So you want some shelving or vines, or I do like the plastic fencing. So there's this plastic vinyl like PVC fencing that you can use for gardening that they can like, you can put from perch to perch or shelf to shelf so they can get those extra points of contact.
Okay.
So there you go for your random question of the day.
Random question, but he's a avid follower, so.
Thank you.
But also we are
at 2 hours.
We are past our 2 hours.
Donovan, thank you so much for coming on and talk a little bit about what you got going on, what you want people to check out, and where they can reach you.
Okay, well, I probably spend way too much time on Facebook. My art page is Drawn to Scales. I have the world's first reptile tattoo coloring book available.
Hey!
Ooh.
I'm also going, while I'm doing shameless plugs, I'm also want to thank all my friends who nominated me. The Reptile Report awards are coming up. If anyone wants to nominate me again for Artist of the Year, that's really cool. That's probably the only recognition for reptile artists that I'm aware of. And since I do this now professionally, that's cool. That and there's a lot of other really cool artists, really good artists that are up there. And like I said, just the fact that people enjoy and want to pay me to do my favorite thing in the world, I think is awesome. So yeah, just check out my Drawn to Scales is my art. I've got a Facebook page. I've got an Etsy store. And I'm always spamming all the groups I can with my art too. So I'm not hard.
And then Instagram. Do you have Instagram you want to plug?
I'm on Instagram as well. I tried everything else from Google Plus to Twitter, and I just kind of gave up. Tumblr. It's like a whole nother weird. Great thing about Tumblr is
for your fetishes.
Seem kind of normal. But yeah, I'm not hard to find online, at least. It's weird because I'm really an eccentric introvert, and apart from reptile shows and social media, that's about my only contact I have most of the time with the outside world, other than my girlfriend and my kids. But yeah, you'd have more trouble trying to avoid me than you would finding me. Let's put it that way.
You'll see him on the colubrid groups and whatever that is.
You're right.
But and while you're there at the Reptile Report, you can nominate us for.
I just told everyone in the chat to
way
do
to go,
it.
asshole.
It's okay. Go
I
nominate.
hate plugging that kind of shit. I feel
didn't
like
think
such
you would do it. That's why I said it in the chat, because I know you.
I'm fine
with
it. I'll, like I said, it's fine.
I have no problem. He hates it. He hates plugging us. Which I'm like, who gives a shit? Go like us or go nominate us video show of the year, Theportcitypythons.
And radio show of
the year, but it's kind of pointless to do radio show of the year because NPR is gonna win radio show of the year.
No, they deserve to win, okay, but all the other people who haven't put out episodes this whole year and still get nominated.
Yes, there's a lot of people getting nominated who haven't even done anything in like a year. So that's bullshit.
That happened when I was doing my Corn Snake podcast. I quit doing it, and I was still having people nominate me, and I was like, no, go do somebody else that's still doing it.
But it's like, I don't know. I don't really care, but then again, it's like that would be nice because we put this shit out every week, so it's like,
yeah. So I mean, NPR 100% deserves it. Like,
no, they're gonna win either way.
Promoting yourself, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. You're doing something that is educational and entertaining. You should be proud of that.
Yeah.
And if you have a kid under 10 and they don't have a Reptile coloring book, then shame on you.
Exactly.
Because you should go buy one from Donovan.
Is it for kids or is it for adults?
Over 10.
Or if you need an adult coloring book therapy, right? That's a thing?
Yes.
There you go.
Right. Yeah, I didn't use the word adult coloring book because I didn't like the connotation of adult coloring book.
None of the snakes wear clothes.
You're right.
Hey.
I did like different versions. So you got like a simple, you got like a morph, and then you can kind of like do your own morph and add your own banner. So
okay.
Because I've never seen a purple duck before. That's really what it's for.
Yeah. What was that accent?
I'm hoping this does good.
That was my Billy Madison impression.
I want to do like a series of them. So
cool.
And check out his art if you're into corn snakes. If you're into, you have all types of shit. You even have Morelia stuff, which a lot of us are into Morelia.
Or boas, from like Morelia to indigo snakes to dogs.
And he drew the sickness, right?
Bela Lugosi, whatever.
What did he say?
He drew the sickness.
Oh, you did the sickness.
Right, yeah. So I think
which is a local guy, Bill Stiegel.
Yeah, actually, hang on. I got it right here, actually.
Ooh, I didn't realize how velvety cool that chair is, by the way. Ooh, the sickness.
So yeah,
the coolest green tree.
Pictures, and I'm like, I gotta paint that. So.
Really cool. Where can you get your prints? You probably already said this, but fucking.
I haven't really done.
Not gonna remember stuff.
Oh
really?
Yeah, that's something. I'm hoping to get like a good printer myself so I can make my own. So most of the stuff I sell is like originals. I don't know. I have weird views on prints. I just kind of feel like it kind of devalues the original sometimes, but I'm sure I'll probably get greedy or something at some point and do it anyway. But
okay, wait. I'm sorry. I was talking while you showed the sickness, so everyone only saw me making noises. So can you show the sickness again while I'm quiet?
Make sure I got. So here he is.
Hell yeah! I can't talk. Sorry.
Jay, you
no, he saw. They saw it. I think we've rambled on for the outro for like 30 minutes. So.
Okay, someone said, wow, that's awesome. Oh, also, by the way, like 3 people during this podcast have been like, oh, that's the like art, corn snake art guy or like something like that. And so it's
something to that effect
to pump up your ego a little bit. Everyone's like, oh, this guy, like, cool.
Yeah, that's my niche.
Well, thank you guys so much for watching, for listening, for being here. PortCityPythons.com, Instagram, PortCityPythons, whatever, PortCityPythons. If you made it this far, you know all of our shit.
Next week's episode 50, we clearly didn't plan anything.
50, we're going to have it on Tuesday because Brandon can't do Monday. So,
yeah. Well, we didn't play anything super cool, but we're having...
Brandon Sanders. If I'm not fucking it up, it's Brandon Sanders.
I think that's his name.
We're going to talk about a little bit of him trying to pair up green tree pythons and jungle carpet pythons. And we're just going to talk general fun Morelia stuff.
Maybe you will find a way to make it special for 50. I don't know how.
Brandon I'll tell him to bring his A game.
Bring his A game.
Yeah.
Also, everyone... please pray that my school is closed tomorrow because we're potentially getting snow flurries. So I might have off school. I might have a 3-day week.
And buy a coloring book, you fucks. Sorry, guys.
Coloring
that was
book
aggressive.
is a great thing to do when you're snowed in.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. There you go. That was a proper transition instead of just yelling at people. Thanks, guys. Later.